Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and my guest this week is somebody I had the honor of meeting at the All Out Fan Fest. It is Father Guillermo Trevino. Uh, Met this man in line to meet Thunder Rosa, and later on, he would have a video of him giving a blessing to Miss Rosa go viral, and I just thought it was really cool to see a priest at a wrestling event, and saw that he had social media when his the video went viral, and thought I had to talk to him. So, Father, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question is, when did you become a fan of pro wrestling?
Well, this is the shocking part. I tell people before I was even born, my parents met at a wrestling lucha libre event in San Antonio, Texas in
Oh wow,
1984. So in a sense, that became a date. They would go to wrestling events,
that's
the local
awesome.
luchadors, and then 2 years later, I was born. So before I was even born, in a sense, it was already in my blood, and so it was more the Mexico lucha libre, and then as a kid growing up with Nitro and Raw, the Monday Night Wars, so just kind of, and then Seth, I'm from the Quad Cities, which is the Illinois-Iowa border.
Right.
So Davenport, Seth Rollins, and so when he was champ, kind of got me back into it again.
Okay. Okay. Well, you mentioned growing up in San Antonio, so obviously Texas is a huge wrestling hotbed. So were you watching World Class? Were you watching the Lucha Libre down there? Who were some of the wrestlers that really growing up that you were really a big fan of?
Yeah, so only the first 3 years of my life were in Texas, so that's my excuse to cheer for all the Texas teams, the Cowboys who lost, the Spurs. But then we moved to the Quad Cities, which is the Illinois-Iowa border, and then from 3 years through 29, I grew up in Moline, Illinois.
Okay.
And so there, I remember there was I think it was either 96 or 97, the Great American Bash was actually in Moline.
Oh wow.
And so the main event was Page Savage 2. So I always loved Macho Man because and I
Okay.
know my mom liked the Macho Man too. So it's probably more from my mom, but I remember that. And then, um, from Raw. Everyone liked Stone Cold, The Rock, but I was always with the Latino wrestlers.
Gotcha.
So Eddie Guerrero, the cruiserweights on WCW, I was always my La Parca, the chairman. It was always
Awesome.
Viano 4 and 5. I was like, what happened to 3, 2, and 1? But still, it was.
It's funny you mentioned being a fan of the cruiserweights because right before I met you, I met Andrade and Chavo. And I remember always really liking Chavo in WCW and Lieutenant Loco. And I remember my friends would always make fun of me. So I made it a point to tell Chavo that whenever I met him, like, hey, I was really liking WCW and I got made fun of a lot for it. So, awesome. So, you know, big fan of all that. You mentioned moving to the Quad Cities, and we talked about Seth Rollins, formerly Tyler Black. Did you kind of get on his train before he got made it big, or were you kind of somebody that retroactively like, oh hey, he's from here, I'm
Right.
on board with him.
The second one, it was
Okay,
more, yeah, just there were articles in the paper when he went to what would become NXT that he had signed with WWE, and I'm like, well, I think I got to cheer with this guy. And then with the Shield, and when he became the bad guy, the big swear, we all thought it would be Ambrose, now Moxley, and so I got to cheer for the local guy when he got that big push, and cashed Money in the Bank. It was like I had to, and
saved WrestleMania.
ironically. Yeah. Ironically, my first 3 years as a priest, Quad Cities, I'm a priest for the Diocese of Davenport, Iowa. So 5 minutes away from Moline is Davenport, where my first assignment, and part of my first assignment included Buffalo, Iowa, where he grew up. So his aunt was a member of that
That's
church, some
awesome.
of his cousins. So my first Christmas as a priest in 2015, they asked him to get me an autograph, and he gave me a personal autograph to Reverend Guillermo Trevino, and then thanks for the support. And then he also gave a WrestleMania action figure from when he cashed in
That's
the
cool.
Money in the Bank. So I was speechless, which is weird because I love to talk all the time. So no, it's
um, okay, kind of switching gears from wrestling to kind of the science fiction part of that. What was kind of your first gateway into that? talked about the Mandalorian a little bit off camera.
Yeah.
But what are some of the other things you like other than Star Wars?
It's funny, in middle school, a friend of mine that really loved Star Wars and Episode One, he's the one that kind of got me into it. I was teasing him, Star Trek is better. I just, I didn't know what I was talking about. I just said it. He goes, "Well, have you seen any Star Wars?" And I go, "Not really." And from there, it's little by little, I got hooked. And then with the Mandalorian, kind of a resurgence again, because the last couple of Star Wars, I mean, they were okay, but not perfect. So
Right.
Mandalorian, I was hooked. I'm like, oh, Baby Yoda, everything. And my house is a lot like yours, but with Baby Yoda stuff.
Okay.
I know I'm not on film, but my parishioners tease me like, you got Baby Yoda everything, and a little frame there,
Nice.
and then some pops. I think I have a lot of the pops of Baby Yoda.
I would.
Pretty,
I've seen
uh,
all the AEW figures. I wish you guys could see this. Definitely post a
uh,
picture of this on your Twitter because this is awesome. Like,
and
oh,
then
we got the
yeah,
micro brawlers. Gotta love that. Yeah, that's
yeah, the
Is that an MJF 2020 sign that I see?
yes, I put it outside. I put it outside my house. Um, where people were like, "Who are you endorsing?" Oh, he's a wrestler. I told people because politics can get a little,
little
pushy, and
little
it's like,
pushy.
"Oh no, he's a wrestler. He's kind of a jerk, but I'm like a fan of his." Yes. So
So um, you're very interested in these sort of things. Is this was any of this ever a problem? Well, first of all, I guess I should ask: Did you go to Catholic school or did you go to public school?
no, I was public school, the Moline
Okay.
School District. And but it's funny, when I was in middle school, ironically, Moline John Deere Middle School, they're so important to the economy, and that was the name of my middle school. Um, at that time, that was the big wrestling, the mid '90s, late '90s, and early 2000s when it was huge. And so the NWO, we were doing NWO signs, and they thought it
Yeah.
was a gang sign,
Oh
so they
no.
stopped us from that because I was like, we were just trying to be cool, because wrestling was cool, and then the wrestling t-shirts with NWO, it was weird. I was like, no, they're mocking the NWO New World Order, the
Yeah.
conspiracy theory and all that, but they're like, nope, it's banned, and so they banned
Yeah.
t-shirts. I remember, so I didn't actually get in trouble. They just, because we liked wrestling, didn't understand it. That's probably, I remember a girl saying, oh, it's fake. And when I wasn't a priest, I was thinking, oh, like you? But no,
Oh.
yeah, but so no, my non, so no, but you always, like I know my nieces and nephews now. I think I've gotten them into wrestling, and they're like starting to question. Oh, people at school say it's fake, and so I say, well, it's entertainment. Everyone likes
I,
to be entertained, and
My favorite thing when I hear that is, "What's your favorite show?" Oh, it's Breaking Bad. Walking Dead. Oh, they're not really cooking meth or killing zombies, right?
there,
That's fake. But
that's a good one. To share, but yeah, so that just mainly the social criticism. Oh,
right.
they see wrestling fans at the bottom, but no, I think not as many wrestling fans today. I do think my parishioners like to see the real me,
Right.
and so
And I
it's
can.
actually been a blessing. In my first 3 years in Davenport, I found out one of the churches I was at. So I mentioned Buffalo. Another one was St. Alphonsus in the west end of Davenport. And Vern Gagne's sister belonged to that church, and
Oh
for
wow.
charity, he would come and have AWA shows for the church. So I was like, wow, I have the best assignment ever, because two of these parishes, because usually wrestling and being that open, oh, I don't want anything to do with this
Right.
guy. But it
Well,
went the opposite.
we're gonna circle back to that. But when did you start feeling that you had the calling to the priesthood?
Yeah,
Um.
I say God has a sense of humor. As a kid, I want to be president of the United States. My first email, President Trevino 2024 at yahoo.com. Kind of scary, but coming up. But no, I'm not running, so no. But I I just in high school, my dad died when I was 14, so I tell people with little faith went out the door. But again, this president dream, so I got to start somewhere. So I ran for senior class president my junior year of high school, and I got asked what my thoughts on abortion were, and not having any faith, I'm like, "What's an abortion?" I had no idea. The guy that would become my best friend. We had the same birthday. He's the one that wanted to be a priest, and just somehow I read this catechism. It led me little by little back to the faith. I got confirmed. Not till I was 20 because of my pride. I was just the priest that buried my father says, well, you got to either get confirmed with the eighth graders or RCIA for adults. I felt I was too old for one group, too young for the other. But again, God has a sense of humor. My best friend invited me to visit some seminaries, and somehow I'm the priest, and he actually got married in Australia. So.
Okay. Um, so you visited the seminary. Did you attend college, beforehand, or was it just straight from high school to the
Yes,
seminary?
I was a government major, so political science, my community college, Black Hawk Community College. But there was starting, just starting to, I would write as a journalist. I worked part-time for some Spanish newspapers, Hola America. And so from that, but I just felt, I don't know, it made no sense logically. A guy that never went to church, a guy that just, wasn't really active. My first time I ever served at Mass was in the seminary, and they told me, wait, you got this far without? I go, yep, it just, so I'd say God's the ultimate comedian, and here I am.
So was it kind of a weird transition? I mean, I'm not maybe the I identify as Catholic, but I'm maybe not the most best practicing one in the world. Was it hard for you kind of going from that, no faith lifestyle, wrestling and sci-fi and all this culture to going into what I've been led to believe is a little bit more of a strict discipline of the seminary? Was that difficult for you? Did you find it very easy because you felt like you had the calling? Take me through that.
No, no, I've always been kind of a class clown rebel. So in seminary, it's really hard to be that. And
Right.
so I did have my struggles. But I think eventually what seminary is really about, and they try to get you at this, is to be the best version of yourself. So in a sense, because I'm in the culture, I grew up in the Latino culture. There's a saying, familias primero, families first. And I remember there was a class on putting God first, and I'm crying, what, does this mean I can't love my family? They go, of course not, of course not. It just means when you put God, you put everything in its order, and you'll love everything more than ever, which is true. So like my Facebook, I joke in no particular order, but my bio profile thing says, I think it says I like wrestling, Comic Cons, and God. So I can still love everything, and I feel I love it more than ever because
Right.
it just just to rearrange things. And again, God's not selfish, but it took me a while to figure that out, discover it.
Okay. So you get through the seminary and you say your first. What year do you finish all that?
2015,
2015, and
2015.
then you go to Davenport. Um, was it ever you know personal experience here? I'll share with you and the listeners. In my local church, we had a priest somewhat similar to you, may not necessarily for wrestling, but he was very, very younger, kind of youthful, was very about, doing new sort of things to keep kids interested in church. And kind of the old guard in the diocese and the old guard of the church wasn't a fan of that in the slightest. They weren't a fan of a priest wearing any shoes to mass. They weren't a fan of youth meetings going to baseball games instead of just praying. And eventually, he got removed from this area. You remind me of him in a lot of ways, with your wrestling and your, the Star Wars and all that sort of thing. Has that ever created a problem with your parish, the diocese? Has any of that ever happened to you? Because like, oh, this guy, he needs to be talking about God. He needs to be, teaching these kids God, not AEW or not Baby Yoda. Has that ever happened?
I've been lucky. I mean, there's been people that are critical. Like I remember, but usually I see it as a teachable moment. So another thing I like is going to the movie theater, and I forget which premiere I went to see because I like to see them the night it comes out. Maybe it was Venom a couple of years ago, but one of the movies I remember I put online, and I remember a parishioner saying, "Father, I could be dying, and you're at a movie." And so I responded, well, don't wait to the last second. Let me know ahead of time so I don't make those plans. Or, let's do it in the morning and whatnot. So usually there is some, small criticisms, but I think people have learned to accept me for who I am. And I tell them, I accept you as you are, so please accept me. One of the coolest things I ever did, I was born in San Antonio, so I think it was 2017, the Royal Rumble was in San Antonio, where I was born. I hadn't gone since my father died. So I'm like, oh, I have to go. And I got really lucky. I got fourth row seats,
Oh, that's cool.
right behind Michael Cole. And a friend of mine took a picture from watching it on TV. And so sent it to me that might, and then I think Noel Foley and Frank the Clown are in the front row like they usually are. And then me in the fourth row, Goldberg and his wife and son. So, but I just got lucky that day. I never get that lucky. I've never had this before or after. But that weekend, I went to go where I was born, celebrated Mass where I was baptized. But the person that filled in for me, because it was kind of last minute, and I guess a lot of priests were on vacation or whatnot, I couldn't find a sub. I'm like, oh, I have to go because what am I going to do? So my bishop at that time, Bishop Amos, I begged him, I need my one favor, no questions asked. And he goes, what happened? I go, I need a sub. And so the bishop did my masses while I was at the Royal Rumble. So so it was great for him to support me, and I think people were like, wow, he got the bishop to fill in for him. So in the Catholic Church, that's the boss of each region. So.
um, that's awesome. So,
Yes, yes.
okay, so you mentioned you like going to Comic Cons. I mean, obviously, I met you and then saw you again at All Out real briefly. You're wearing the traditional, I know I said I was Catholic, but you're not forgetting me. What do you actually call that? The
The
outfit,
clerical shirt.
the
The
clerical shirt.
clerical.
Okay. So you're wearing that, at the All Out Fan Fest. You said you like going to comic book conventions. Do you usually wear that, or is there sometimes where you put on the T-shirt and maybe they wouldn't know
Yeah,
you were a priest if they saw you just walking through the
yeah.
convention?
I'd say about 99% of the time I've worn my, for me, it's a great conversation starter
It
because usually
is.
it's like
Yes.
it's like some people, religious or not, there's a fine line, and they think I'm mocking, and I'm like, well, no, I'm a real priest from
Yeah.
Iowa, and then so that starts a conversation like, what,
Yeah.
because they thought and then from there we end up talking. Well, we went in line. That makes the line go faster. So I've always
Absolutely, it
seen it as
does.
a conversation starter. Yeah, and being only 3 hours from Chicago, mainly the Chicago Comic Cons.
Right.
I saw your Wizard World with Stan Lee. This is the last one, I think, and then Ace Comic Con, kind of a newer one. And then I flew all the way to New York to take a picture with Gal Gadot for 2 seconds. And but no, it was in the Justice League, so it was awesome. And then given what they charge, I take my nieces and nephews so they can enjoy too.
That's cool.
The last C2E2 pre-pandemic, the last real Comic Con I went to, one of the big guests was the Hulk, and so I took my sister and her son, who at that time was like a year older too, and so and we had churros with the Hulk. It was a cool picture. That yeah, and so he enjoyed it too, and so yeah, and he goes, "Oh, that's a great idea, Father." I go, "Yep, we just want churros with the Hulk," and
Was
so
it was
sometimes
it
I make them
was it Lou Ferrigno or was it
the new one, Ruffalo, Mark
Mark Ruffalo?
Ruffalo.
Okay, okay, that's still pretty
Yeah, yeah.
cool.
So they had gotten a big guest, and so yeah, no, I've had a lot of amazing experiences. Tom Wilson, who's a very religious Catholic, I didn't know that, but I ran into him the night before at a Giordano's, but I had no idea who he was, and I felt horrible. And he's like all talking to me. I didn't know he was secretly recording me, but he's all excited. And then the next day he says, "Come and say hi." I'm like, I don't even know who this is, and so then I'm walking to Comic Con, and I guess I go by his booth, and he stops whatever he's doing to come to me, and says, "Padre Guillermo," and I'm like, who is this? I still feel horrible, and so he's more excited to see me than I was. But then eventually I see the picture, and I'm like, "Oh, Biff." He goes, "No, Giordano's," and so then he made a little YouTube video. So no,
That's
it's
cool.
an
Um,
amazing.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your
No,
story.
just
Okay,
some
sorry.
amazing experiences going to these Comic Cons, and then as long as the lines are meeting new people as well, so I enjoy that.
I was gonna say, is there any other? You're going through the line just to meet whoever you want to meet. Has there been any? Maybe obviously, he was Catholic, but like, was there anybody who wasn't Catholic that started the conversation, like from the celebrity or the actor actress perspective? Have they been like, oh, are you? What's your costume? No, I'm actually a priest, and then like something started
Uh,
from there. Or...
yeah, I another E2, a good friend of mine, because I tend, given what they charge, we carpool together, try and get as many people to enjoy
Yep.
it, and try to share each other's photo ops too. So Chloe Bennett, who I really didn't know at that time, but a friend of mine had gotten a picture with her, and I think the deal was that he could do a picture with me with Stan Lee, and he would do Chloe Bennett. That way we share and all the experience. So I didn't know her as well, but she was like, she they say Catholic guilt, even though she's not Catholic, or maybe she was, but you could tell she was a little uncomfortable. She's like, "Oh, I feel I have to confess," and I said, "Well, just be yourself and just So I could tell she was a little uncomfortable, but my friend, who was a real fan, he said, "Oh, he's here with me because we're sharing photo ops," and just so then I think that helped, you know, just ease the mood.
Were you able? Obviously, especially a thing like a comic book convention or a wrestling event or a wrestling fan fest. It's a very diverse group of people from all different walks of life, including religions.
Oh,
Um, I'm sure you've met several people that have a different faith than you. Have you ever come across anybody from a different faith that was respectful, disrespectful? Have you had any like good experiences, just kind of trying to be yourself, and even with somebody who maybe doesn't necessarily share the same faith as you?
yeah, there was a Presbyterian minister at All Out at the end of the show. I was waiting because
Really?
I bought a T-shirt from somebody online, and they were gonna, but I because they got there a lot earlier than me, and some of that stuff sells out quickly, and so I told him, please get me a shirt, even though I never met him in my life, and we were gonna meet by some section. Well, everyone's exiting, and then the guy sees me, and goes. He told his friend, "See, I told you I'm not the only clergy person here." Like he told me, we were rushed, but because again I was trying to find, and so we talked briefly, and so yeah, very
Okay.
respectful, and I think even people with no religion, they're like, wow, I remember probably because of Thunder Rosa, but it all out there were like four people that wanted selfies with me, and so I don't. It's unique. I was like. And I know the lady said, "I'm not religious, but I need a selfie with this priest that likes wrestling." And so no, it's been mainly positive. I've had one not so good experience. The guy, it was weird. He brought a Jesus, and I wanted the selfie with Jesus, and then so it was him and his friend. But even though it was quote unquote mocking, I still wanted a selfie with Jesus. I'm like, well, he's my boss. I got to get a selfie with. And and I guess the guy said, "Wait, what?" I go, "No, I'm a real priest." And then he went on to a little tangent, but I was, I said, "Hey, thank you for taking the picture, and we'll agree to disagree." And so,
Okay. So
but,
so nobody's been outwardly disrespectful to you who maybe doesn't share the same faith as you.
correct,
Okay.
correct.
So obviously we met because of AEW. Um, did how did you first hear? This is my question for everybody who I bond with over AEW. How did you first become aware of the Elite, All In? How did this come about in your wrestling fandom?
Yeah, it's weird. I again, a friend of mine from meeting wrestling events and Comic Cons, he got a suite for All Out 2 years ago when Jericho against Hangman, and I've never seen Jericho wrestle before. So I'm like, oh, I have to go. I didn't really know any of the other wrestlers. I knew Kenny Omega, and I've always admired him from his New Japan time, but I really didn't know a lot of them. And then for whatever reason, I just admired MJF. Again, that's my other,
I just gotta point this out for the record. A priest admiring MJF. I just
uh,
that That's
So
awesome. I love that.
so there was a local because I stayed for a couple of days for that first All Out 2 years ago, which was the first AEW title match, and so there was a AAW, a local indie
Okay.
show at the famous Logan, I think Logan Square Auditorium, and MJF was doing a show, his last kind of independent shows there, and so just to see him with the audience and things, and his mouth, of course, the way he talks. So I picked up seeing it. I tend to cheer for a lot of the bad guys, so NWO,
There's
and
a bit of
then
irony there. The priest cheers for the bad guys.
right,
Go
right,
figure.
and then I remember at the Jericho Cruise. That's when I really
Oh, you
got
were on the
into
Jericho
AE.
Cruise?
The one 2 years ago,
Okay.
pre-pandemic,
Tell me about
and
that.
so similar. Last minute, somebody had an opening. A roommate, I think, on Mania Club, a Facebook group. They typed, and so then they at first there was going to be a drawing, and I'm like, if I added the math, I'm like, I can't afford this. I said, I'll buy all the tickets. That way, I'm guaranteed the winner. And he's like, wait, what? And I'm like, well, I'd love to go. He goes, okay, and so he transferred things into my name and everything. And I went, and just walking around, I got to meet a lot of the wrestlers, the meet and greets, and that included MJF.
Uh
So yeah, so because on Twitter he had made me famous a couple times because I would buy his shirt and say, wearing an MJF shirt, I've never looked better, and he responded, well, to be honest, you couldn't look any worse. And there was another one. This one was probably the most viral on Christmas. My sister got me an MJF scarf that says, I can't afford a real scarf.
the
It was
one
a
you were
pro
wearing at the
wrestling.
Fan Fest, yes.
Yes, and so that one, it had a. So then on Christmas Day, I'm like, I just got this from my sister, and he replied, well, it's a good thing you're a priest because you still wouldn't get any. And so yeah, so MJF kind of made me infamous, and
Oh
some
dear.
people. So then when we actually met at the Jericho Cruise, I was first in line. I said I have to be first and everything, and so just a simple conversation, and he asked, are you really a priest? And I go, yes. And then he says, Jesus isn't real. And so yeah, and then
Oh my
because
god.
everyone's scared to meet him, and the other choices were better. I was to meet the Elite, MJF, Jurassic Express, and the women of AEW. And we were joking, the people in the MJF line, what is wrong with us? We could have met all the other three. And so then, because I was in first in line, I got a ticket for the Elite, but their line was so long, so then I did one with the women of AEW, and then back to the MJF line because his line was so short. I think I ended up going through like 5 times, and so I drove him nuts. He's like, "Why do you keep coming back?" I go, "Well," and I go, "Well, I'm your only fan, so you need support. Somebody's got to cheer for you." And so then I think 2 weeks later, Revolution was in Chicago, and I couldn't go to Revolution, but I went to C2E2, which had another meet and greet with MJF, and I took my niece with me, and she didn't want to do it I told her I'll give her free ice cream. So she told them because MJF's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Well," my niece says, "Well, he told me he'd buy me free ice cream." And so then MJF, maybe warming up to me, I don't know. He said, "Oh, well, say hi to Jesus for me." So it, but yes.
Oh, that's awesome. What was the Jericho, other than the meet and greets, what was the Jericho Cruise like? Because I mean, it looked like a fun trip. It's just
Yes,
hard to plan something like that, especially in this day and age. So, like, what was the
yes,
whole weekend
yes,
like, or week, or however long it
yeah,
was?
yeah. No, you fly in, and it was funny because I think Victoria was like 3 people down from me, the former WWE wrestler, and so I'm like, oh, I gotta do a selfie. We're already on the cruise, and a selfie with Victoria. And then as I went for dinner, because the wrestlers, they got to eat just like us, so they're in the buffet lines, and I ran into Moxley right before he entered, and so it's right before he entered, so I got a selfie with Moxley. The boat hadn't even left yet, and I already got two big selfies.
So
MJF,
lucky. I still yet to meet Moxley. So,
and so it was just, and eventually I ended up meeting just about everyone on the cruise of the wrestlers. I even ran into JR right before he would, because I
nice.
kept walking around. I had to go to the bathroom, and oh, there's JR. So another photo, and just so you run into them everywhere. MJF, it was funny because he had to wait in line like everyone else, and so people are like, MJF, I thought you were better than us, you know. And so he plays character. He never breaks character, so he just got angry and things like that. But there was wrestling every night. So in a sense, the first unofficial house shows for AEW, you would get to see different matches. And
Do you remember some of the matches?
I remember the Elite. Who do they face? I maybe SCU, but I can't 100% remember. I do. The Dynamite was taped the day before, so it was Tuesday. That way they could send the tape because they weren't sure how good the reception would be. That's where Hangman and Omega won the belts
Right.
against SCU. So the next day I got a meet and greet with Hangman, and he had the new belt he
That's
had won.
cool.
And so that I remember. I remember that was the first time they sang the Jericho song. I remember the last night Cody had a match, and as he was walking out, I asked for a selfie. So again, it was it was an awesome time. Again, unfortunately, my group, because of everything going on, because we didn't even know each other, but we just wanted to save costs by rooming together. So talk about trust. But I went. I went because it was for, it was an amazing time. Again, every experience I make into a homily. So I said, for me, all these like-minded people, all these wrestling fans on a boat, but part of it too is reality to get out of the boat. So I said, I have to come back. Not everybody here likes wrestling or wrestling cruises, but I remember hearing Fozzy every night.
Awesome.
I remember there was a guy from England. He said, "Oh, I've never seen a priest that likes metal and wrestling." And he said, "Well, one of those two is true," but I left it at but I was at the Fozzy to enjoy, and so Fozzy was in Iowa City not too long ago, so I went to see him with a friend, a guy that's actually thinking about Priesthood. So who knows? He bought the ticket now. So, but it's interesting. I think it makes other men comfortable that you can see what I like and don't like, for better or worse. And so even though I'm not a big metal fan, I've gone to 2 Fozzy concerts and just enjoy the music. And so that, and the cruise, Fluffy was there too, Gabriel Iglesias. So there's a funny picture for his meet and greet. He put his hands like praying and making, like, looking at me for like approval. And so I'll send you all them Jericho photos.
Yeah, definitely send them. Real quick, two questions. First of all, is it awkward for you as a priest to be listening and jamming out to a song called Judas?
It's a catchy tune, so everybody knows the song. I think at first, originally seeing the title, sadly judging, I was like, what? But it's a catchy song, and what have I become? How did I betray? So, but the words are. No, it's like that's usually when we do something bad, we thunder, and so the lyrics are pretty deep if we listen to them, and so I just see it as a catchy song. And there's another one that Jericho had, because listening to Fozzy every night at the Jericho Cruise, I don't remember the lyrics, but something about Jesus, like I want to party with Jesus or something, and I'm like, I started singing it too, so yeah.
Okay, so you just mentioned that you turn these experiences from, like the Jericho Cruise into homilies at your church. Do you remember like how you've worked Comic Cons and maybe other wrestling events into your homilies? Anything you could just recall of? Because I've never heard any priest do that ever. So I'm just kind of interested to see what that was like.
Yeah, I remember. Well, Wonder Woman. That's my. I always joke that because I told the parishioners I'm flying all the way to New York for 2 seconds with Gal Gadot for a photo op, and they're like, "Oh, it's funny." The older people, they know Linda Carter more.
Right.
So it's funny. Some people thought, "Wait, is that your sister?" I'm like, "No, that's not." Because I make it my Christmas card. Usually, some celebrity every year or whatnot. I have a friend that is really good graphic designer, and so no, I just try to theologize. So theology, put the Lord in it, and just kind of share that joy experience, and so that's kind of just I've always worked is try to theologize everything, see the good. So even in the Judas song, oh, listen to the lyrics. What do they say? Oh, well, the power of when we fall and how we, are struggling. So I try to see the good in everything, and that's helped me in my life.
Okay, that's awesome. Um, we definitely need a lot of priests like you that see the good in everything, especially things a little bit outside the box.
Hmm.
So that was so deep. I kind of lost my train of thought there. That was good. Um, okay, so you showed me, and unfortunately the listeners aren't going to be able to see this. All the nerdy stuff in your house. Uh, does that endear you to the youth of your church? I know a few months ago I had a school principal who wrestles, and his principal's office is full of wrestling memorabilia, and that would just pump me up as a kid going to school. Now, same thing. If I'd have known that my priest has Star Wars and AEW figures, or just wrestling figures around, I'd be going to church every week. So, has that endeared you to the youth, or maybe lapsed churchgoers?
I think so. Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, 'cause I'm part of a lot of Facebook internet groups or Twitter, and sometimes people like them and share them that are strangers. And so I remember some random comment, somebody said, "Oh, I wish I had a cool priest like that." And so then I shared that on Facebook personally. I'm like, "This is the first time in my life I've been called cool." I was never, the cool kid or any of that. And so I remember some of my friends commenting like, "Well, we never said that, but you have your own uniqueness." And so, but the point still says that that was the first time I ever heard the word cool. Now it's a little more common. And with this Thunder Rosa thing, I'm even doing a podcast now, and people were asking for blessings after I did it with Thunder
Yeah.
Rosa. So it's given some new opportunities. And I think one of my gifts is because people see the good and bad in me, they become more comfortable in speaking to me, and so that includes the youth, because the youth, just like when we were young,
Mhm.
don't know, it's hard to trust. There's a lot going on in life, peer pressure and everything. And so I think by breaking that ice, as they say, oh, what, this priest likes Baby Yoda, he's wearing a Baby Yoda keychain and,
Mm.
all that stuff. And I also have a Spider-Man key I had custom
Oh,
made for
nice.
this is my house key, a
Oh, sure.
Spider-Man.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, so yeah, but I think that breaks the ice, because sometimes I don't think people do it on purpose, but on all sides they're like, oh, I want to be respectful and maybe,
Mhm.
but by breaking that ice, people feel a lot more comfortable on all ends.
Um, okay, so last big thing I got to ask you about. So obviously, kind of went viral. Got posted on Thunder Rosa's Instagram and Twitter, giving her a blessing. When did you first become a fan of Thunder Rosa? And tell me the story of that. Did you offer the blessing? Did she ask for the blessing? Tell me about that
So
experience.
I tend to cheer always for the Latino wrestlers, whether they're heels or faces. And so with Thunder Rosa, her background being a Texan and originally from Mexico, starting that wrestling company, being the NWA champion, kind of breaking the mold, because she's having the NWA belt on AEW.
Mhm.
Eventually she gets the contract. So it's just a great story of perseverance, because being smaller and everything doesn't have quote unquote the look, but she does. She's an excellent wrestler, and so that and being Latina, which helped me admire her even more. And then it's a great theme song too, and the face paint. So just she's
Yeah.
got it all. She really. And then so I'm like, oh, I have to stand in line, even though it was one of the longer
Oh
lines.
yeah. Well, we,
And
we
I'm like,
started we started camping out before. Like,
right,
it was even before her session even began, because we're like, this is
right,
gonna be long, and we
right,
weren't lucky enough to have VIP, so we're like, yep, better just wait
right,
for Thunder Rosa here.
right. And so it and then I remember asking in line, what line is this for? Thunder Rosa. And I'm like, I guess I need to stand in line because of how big it was. And so and then it was a long time, before my turn came. So just talking to people, and then when it was my turn, I asked her to personalize the photo. I have it in my kitchen. Um, and so then, she wrote, but because I told her Padre Guillermo to personalize it. So to Father Guillermo, and then de la Mera Mera, Thunder Rosa. And so, it meant a lot that she did it in Spanish. And so then we got our picture, and then she came over and said, I got to get a blessing, Father. And I'm like, okay. So I did. And then, she had given her phone to one of those handlers, and then, that video that she shared.
That's
I didn't
awesome.
think, yeah. And then I put my picture online, that Thunder Rosa, and I gave a blessing. And then a couple hours later, when she even tagged me, put my at Father Guillermo,
That's cool.
the Twitter.
That's how I was able to find you, because I'm like, oh
Right,
hey, this guy'd be
right,
really cool to have on the podcast, and oh
right,
thank God Thunder Rosa put it
right,
out there.
right. And so with her, yeah, so that no, I go. I guess I have to cheer for her. At the women's battle royal when she made the final two at All Out, I was like, the people around me, I was like, um, I blessed her, but then when Ruby Soho won, it
Rosa got
just
robbed. I like Ruby Soho, but Rosa got robbed.
yeah, yeah. Her time will come though, and I think
Oh yeah.
Thunder Rosa is. I have two sisters, three nieces, and I think she's a great example for all women, especially Latina women, to not give up, follow
Hmm.
your dream, and it might have some, different swerves in the road, but she's gotten there. She's made it to All Elite Wrestling, and the sky's the limit. I think she's gonna get even bigger.
Oh yeah, she's even after that Young Bucks versus Lucha Bros match that we just saw, I still think her and Britt Baker's number one for
Hmm.
my match of the year right now. Um, I saw the stack of the 8x10s that you got signed. Who else did you meet that weekend?
Jade, a good friend of mine, is a really big fan of hers, so I got her to write congrats for his wedding.
Okay.
Uh, it and then FTR. That picture came out really funny because I'm carrying that scarf. I wanted them to hold it, and so they hold it, but they like don't look. They look such a funny pose, which was my intention. Which is they gave me what I wanted, so that. And then who was the other one? Oh, Chris Statlander. She
Okay.
yeah, and she held the scarf but gave like a weird look and just like did you really ask me to hold MJF's?
What was Chris
So,
Statlander like?
no, she was
Awesome.
a very very kind
Okay.
and good because again she did it out of and even though it was funny she was on a chair. I guess
I
she was
saw you
not
like
as
standing
tall.
up.
Yeah, and she said because she's not as tall as she looks. And so, because on TV, I guess, but no, or maybe regardless, but no, it was still made a great picture of her holding the scarf and all.
so, so you had a good weekend. Did you? What did you think of the All Out Fan Fest? Because I know a lot of people had some different opinions. Just as another person that was there, what was your
Yeah,
opinion?
no, it was a fun time. You get to meet the wrestlers, and they also had the other ones on the side. So seeing the hybrid two, which I've always enjoyed their theme song, getting
Yeah.
to meet them briefly. Some of the others.
Did you meet Kip
Uh,
Sabian? Because he was doing his little deal.
No, his line would always go too long, and then I just
I would
lost
have loved to
patience.
see what that interaction would have been like, and what he would
Yeah,
have wrote with.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then when I finally was able to head over, he'd already left, and because yeah, so no, I did a couple of the free ones, as they said. I guess my only critique, and this is because I have handicapped friends, it there really wasn't something accessible for them.
Right.
Usually at the Comic Cons, they get to go first,
Yeah.
and just but it's just not just for them, but also for us because wheelchairs in line, and so that but he still had a fun time and everything. It just if we're being objective, I think that was probably the one complaint is that things are not accessible for people that
Okay.
need it.
I think it was really well ran. I went to the Starcast convention for All In, and it was a cluster, you know what, and
Uh,
this this one wasn't. I mean, there's a few minor. errors that happened, but nothing that wasn't, kind of taken care of like that. So, um, yeah, and it made me a lot of different people from all walks of life,
Yeah.
and including a priest that liked
Yes.
wrestling. So,
Yes.
uh, it was a good time, and I'm glad I got to meet you. I'm glad I got to meet everybody, and obviously you got social media, but would you like to, put your social media out there in case a listener would like to follow the wrestling fan priest, if you will?
Yeah, at Father Guillermo, Guillermo, and so I think it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's at Father Trevino, Trevino. I'm actually not 100% sure. I've never been asked before. So it's at Father Guillermo. I looked it up. Hey,
Okay.
yep.
And I'll enclose a link in the description box to make sure that people who want to follow you have that opportunity. Is there anything else on your horizon? Any more shows? Do you do? Have you ever thought about bringing local groups to I don't know about your parish. Like, do you have a gym where they could wrestle? You thought about ever using independent wrestling for your parish?
The Knights of Columbus in Muscatine, Iowa. There's a good friend of mine, another wrestling fan. His name's Adrian Arellano, and he keeps wanting me to host a show. We have Rollins Wrestling School and SCW Pro, and he's close with some local independent wrestlers, Latin Thunder, that they do a show. It just liability is what scares the diocese. But that would be my dream, is to have a local indie show in the parish or somewhere around here. It just, again, for benefit of the church, and also would
Right.
raise funds. So
And
someday that's what I'm hoping.
last question. This one just dawned on me. You're from Seth Rollins area. Did that make it awkward being a Seth Rollins fan when he was doing the Monday Night Messiah and being a priest?
So now that I have gotten more into AEW, I haven't watched as much WWE. I heard about it. I was at WrestleMania this year in Tampa,
That's cool.
but no, it's a character, So the good part about it, not, it's a character, and so Rollins is obviously one of the best. It's a great pride for the Quad Cities where I grew up. I tell people that's where I'm from. And so, yeah, my original thing was that I was Seth Rollins' priest because that's where I was from, was Davenport. Now it's become MJF's priest, which is kind of an oxymoron. But now with Thunder Rosa, I
Maybe you're
think I'm
Thunder
now
Rosa's priest now.
I'm Thunder
Yeah.
Rosa. So, but I always
And the latter one's a little bit more believable because she's also
so
Catholic.
right, that one
So
actually, but it I guess, as you mentioned, Tyler Black, his independent name. It's funny with the Young Bucks, because I also saw him at the Jericho Cruise, and the conversation. Oh, yeah, that I think I said I'm Seth Rollins' priest, and then they just looked at me, and I met them later at C2E2, so 2 weeks later, and they looked at me as I was talking. I'm like, I'm Tyler Black's priest, so correcting me from the independent name, and they, I forget which one. He just gives that look. Maybe it was Matt Jackson, but he just gives that look like, say the indie name, don't say the WWE.
well, thank you so much, Father, for being on here. This was an excellent conversation, and I appreciate taking the time, and I feel as someone who maybe kind of not as into the church as maybe some feel I should be. I feel like if we had a lot more open-minded priests like you, I feel like you'd have be a really, really good thing for the church going forward. So thank you for being that person. Thank you for, you know, being a good, open-minded man when it comes to things like this. And, God bless you. And I wish you nothing but the best in going forward.
Yeah, thank you. I guess just a quick final statement, given what you said. I think just encouraging people, it makes them feel good. So, because we're human, we get nervous. So I think when I put myself out there, I'm like, oh man, who's gonna like Baby Yoda or wrestling? But the affirmation, it lifts me up too. So thank you for that. And I think for people watching, affirm your priest, your clergy, whoever, just affirm people, and it'll make them feel comfortable. You'll feel comfortable, and we'll all be better as a society.
We certainly will. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen. If you enjoyed, please give it a like, share, subscribe for more content. Uh, Follow Father Guillermo, and follow me on social media. Twitter, athletic_geek89, Instagram, athletic geek89, Facebook, Athletic Geek 89. And thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.